By 2030, as a thumb rule, you can say that by 2030, everyone has to reduce that their energy consumption by 50% or, at least 45%. So that is a thumb rule that you can take. 89% of the excess energy, the water is retaining that. We have not paid for our sins. The ocean has. So all of that global warming that is there, oceans have tried to be a regulating mechanism. All that water, of course water can hold more of heat. All that excess heat has gone into the oceans. Wind and solar, they have a very high potential contribution to net emission reduction, and they are also like relatively low cost competitive technologies now. So wind and solar are one of the tools that we have to aggressively scale up. More and more solar energy has to be used by houses, by businesses, by government building up huge wind and solar plants for pumping that power into the grid, so that our reliance on coal powered electricity gets reduced. Yeah, like steep cut in greenhouse gas emissions. So something like, by 2030, as a thumb rule, you can say that by 2030, everyone has to reduce that their energy consumption by 50% or, at least 45%. So that is a thumb rule that you can take. And that's an average. So there will be industries, there will be countries, there will be individuals who are burning much more energy. They are responsible for much more higher emissions. For them, the cuts are going to be more drastic. But the point is, the thumb rule would be that everything has to come down by 50% by 2030. That's a tall ask. So a lot of people have given up that, we are just beyond a point of no return, and nobody is acting, so we are just done for. So that is also a view that some people have, that it's all, the cause is lost. But the point is, we don't have an option to do nothing. So whatever possible, we should try. And there's no way not to act. So people who have the realization, who have the capacity and the influence, we have to really wake up and wake up the others as well, and do all we can. So just I want to dwell a bit upon the role of the oceans, that how, because we are like narrow-minded species and we're living on land, so we really are not able to think beyond our immediate surroundings. So, but whatever we do, there's a lot of impact on oceans as well. And human existence has a lot to do with the oceans as well, and oceans supporting the entire ecosystem, which is viable for living beings on land. So as you can see that, there is the excess energy, this entire global warming, the human input in terms of carbon dioxide, methane into the atmosphere, and that leading to global warming, that excess energy, what is happening to that excess energy? 6% of that is getting warmed up in the land, then 4% of the excess energy is warming the cryosphere above, high above, and then 89% of the excess energy, the water is retaining that. We have not paid for our sins. The ocean has. So all of that global warming that is there, oceans have tried to be a regulating mechanism. All that water, of course water can hold more of heat. All that excess heat has gone into the oceans. Now this much significant amount of heat, what is it going to do to the oceans? Of course it is affecting the oceans. It is affecting the corals that are there. It is affecting how the winds are moving over the oceans and turning into very powerful hurricanes. It is affecting the phytoplanktons. So the phytoplanktons, which are like, most of them are there in the upper surface of the oceans, 200 meters of depth around that. So that's the band in which that they exist. And these phytoplanktons, the microscopic organisms, you can say microscopic plants, they, along with the other vegetation in the ocean in terms of your seaweeds and all, they are responsible for 50% of ocean that is there in the atmosphere, and that we, so we'll take the ocean, the excess carbon dioxide also that is being released into the atmosphere, that also gets absorbed by the oceans. So in the atmosphere, there's more carbon dioxide, and all of that is reacting with the water there. It is turning into acid, carbonic acid. and that extra carbonic acid is leading to more acidity in the oceans. The pH value is increasing, and that more acidic range of the water there is not conducive to certain species, so they are also getting affected. And the warmer waters are also driving how the creatures are moving in the ocean, so they are used to a certain temperature, and they are moving to, the fishes are moving away to cooler water, so the livelihood of the fishermen are also getting affected because fishes are going away. And the oceans are, they capture a lot of carbon, a lot of organic matter is there, a lot of living life is there, which is like carbon in the oceans. So if that, in terms of excessive fishing, in terms of killing whales, in terms of, due to higher temperature, phytoplanktons not surviving or, being less in numbers, so that means less organic matter within the ocean. So that carbon capture potential is also going down. And a lot of organic matter settles down to the bottom of the ocean and stays permanently stored there if not disrupted. So all of that potential is also going down in terms of the permanent carbon capture. So the hope that, our oceans will absorb the extra carbon dioxide because of global warming, that is also not happening. A lot of rocks form because of this organic matter which is deposited at the ocean floor. So that is like permanently the carbon is captured, getting captured in the oceans. Everything, every entire process is being disrupted. All these seashells we see, they are like, they have carbon dioxide in them. So the reactions that happen, the carbon dioxide that is dissolved in the seawater, and there are carbonate ions, calcium, and everything combines together, and all these creatures form these shells, which are like permanent storehouses of carbon. And but all of this is getting disrupted, and less these processes are happening. So that means more and more carbon is there in the ocean itself, turning it into acidic. And so it's like a problem. The oceans are also in a problem now because of us. Yeah, just a little bit of graphic. You can see how, the disturbance of organism with calcareous structures, all the animals with those shells, which are like permanent storehouses of carbon, and how the species are migrating because of temperature change, acidity is increasing, all of those things. Even, seagrass, mangroves, planktons, everything is getting disrupted. Yeah, so this you can see how that entire process of, the dead planktons sinking into the ocean floor, and then it's like it's sort of hundreds and thousands of years that organic matter can stay there in that sea floor. It can stay trapped there, and but all the disturbances and all the acidification and the warming, and it's like, of course, the entire aggressive industrial fishing that is also happening. And now there is this thing of even seabed mining disturbing the seabed. So if you're going to disturb the seabed, all that organic carbon which is there at the seafloor, that is also getting will get disrupted and released. So lots of issues getting created. So lots of challenges. A lot of the challenges we do not even understand and are still unknown. We don't have an idea of. But whatever we know and we can anticipate as of now, what is it that we can do? So let's talk about that a bit. So as per Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they have identified certain interventions which will be most effective. They have prioritized, how effective they would be in terms of capturing carbon, reducing carbon emissions, avoiding carbon emissions, and also cost-wise also, what are the costs of that. So here we can see that in terms of energy, you can see that wind and solar, they have a very high potential contribution to net emission reduction. And they are also like relatively low cost competitive technologies now. So wind and solar are one of the tools that we have to aggressively scale up. More and more solar energy has to be used by houses, by businesses, by government building up huge wind and solar plants for pumping that power into the grid, so that our reliance on coal powered electricity gets reduced. So there is hydropower also. Hydropower is expensive. The projects take a lot of time. It also disrupts the ecosystem. So you can see that the potential here is not depicted as a lot. There is geothermal energy, and which is like naturally available in certain areas only. It has its cost of extraction, capital cost of extraction. But yeah, this is also not available everywhere. Nuclear energy is also being talked about now, but with respect to nuclear energy, the big challenge is the waste that gets created. Still, the legacy nuclear waste that we have, that has not been safely dealt with. And if you think about it, nobody would really like to stay next to a nuclear plant. We have the recent disaster we have in memory is from Japan, Fukushima. And the mistrust with all these disasters is that we never get to know the full extent of the damage and what really happened, and what are the implications for the general public. The governments in past have hidden a lot of information, the Russian nuclear disasters, and even in US. So a lot of non-transparency has been there in terms of letting the public know that what has actually happened, how are they being impacted right now, how the generations to come are going to get impacted by the crisis. It is like decades down the line that people get to know, okay, this has happened and this is what the exposure was, this is what the exposure and the liabilities are going to be there. So there's a lot of mistrust, there is a lot of risk factor. It's a genuine risk which is out there, and apparently the nuclear systems which are being looked at right now are smaller in design, and they are supposed to take lesser time to commission. Making a nuclear energy plant also takes a lot of time, but these small nuclear reactors that are being planned right now, they will take lesser time, and apparently they're going to be safe. But the point is, somebody has investments in nuclear energy and the mineral extraction, making those plants, and a lot of vested interest is also there. So this is an cost, and of course it is cost intensive also. A lot of nuclear plants are operating safely for a long time, but given that you have wind and solar option, which is low cost right now, it is grid competitive, it is competitive to coal power plants. Does it make sense to look at nuclear? Instead, shouldn't the governments be very aggressively ramping up wind and solar power and hydro wherever it is viable without disrupting the ecosystem much? And then there is this source of electricity that you have in terms of the waste organic matter, sewage waste which is there. There is a lot of potential to extract energy out of the waste in terms of the gases. There's a lot of organic matter in the sewage waste, so capturing the gases from that and utilizing that for energy. So there's also this thing about waste to energy plant, but the argument against waste to energy plant is that the segregation of waste does not happen properly, and the plants really do not function the way they should, and they emit a lot of emissions. So we'll not talk about waste to energy here, but this sewage treatment and extracting the organic energy from that, and any agri waste that is there, using that. So all kind of organic waste that is there, that has inherent energy in it, and how can we extract that energy? Because that energy is going to be sort of renewable, in the sense that the waste is going to get generated, the sewage waste is going to be there, the agriculture waste is going to be there. So are we really utilizing that potential more? So in Europe, Europe has already, the bigger companies, the MNCs, have started looking at the municipal solid waste and also the agriculture waste in a huge manner. The biogas, in India we had sort of started looking down upon biogas. That is really big in Europe, and now those European startups have come to India, and they're selling biogas modular plants to businesses and farmers in India. So we have to relook at biogas. And even in terms of solar energy, simple intervention like the solar cooker. So we had a solar cooker when we were kids, and I used to love the food that was cooked in it. It used to taste much better. But over the years, solar or simple box solar cookers have not got the attention that they deserve, because apparently the energy prices were not, energy was available, and the crisis was not there. But now that the crisis is there, we have the opportunity to relook at that solution. Wherever there is roof space available, wherever there is sun available, whether it is in urban areas, whether it is in rural areas, solar energy does not have to be used in the form of PV panels. It can also be used in terms of your solar cookers. And of course, in Karnataka, a lot of solar powered geysers which are there, which are thermal energy based solar water heaters are there. So there are different forms of, and in terms of wind, smaller plants, innovative design, smaller plants are being, brought to the market now, and they are being looked at. So wind and solar is the first and the foremost thing that we have to look at. And of course, even before renewable energy, we have something we have called, energy efficiency is called the, sort of fifth fuel or something like that. It is a fuel in the sense that, energy saved is something, energy available. It is kind of, quasi fuel that you have. So energy efficiency in terms of, the lighting and even the fans that we have, the new fans that have the BLDC fans, brushless DC fans that have come in, and even brushless DC motors and different kind of new motors which are being invented. There is this emphasis on waste heat recovery. There's a lot of heat generated in industrial processes. How can we capture that waste heat and redirect that for the processes? The industries, the proactive industries are already doing it. So those are the options that we have to look at. So when we are talking about, buildings, of course, we have to look at efficiency of things, and on site in the buildings we can use energy, and also insulation, insulating the buildings properly so that there is no loss of energy there. And the HVAC, the cooling, how innovative and more energy efficient processes of cooling. So we have to look at that. In terms of agriculture, we have to try and sequester more and more carbon in the land itself. We have to make soil organic matter rich. What is happening is that, I was reading recently on LinkedIn that, somebody was saying that, the fruits and vegetables that our grandparents ate, they had to eat lesser fruit and vegetable to get the same amount of nutrients. Now our soils are so depleted, there's no organic matter in them, there's no nutrient in them. So of course the vegetables and fruits we are getting out of those lands, the nutrition level is very low. And we would need to eat something like, one example was that we will have to eat 8 oranges to get equivalent of, the vitamin A that our grandparents were getting from one orange. So this is drastic. What are we doing to the land? It is a lot of chemical agriculture, few chemical nutrients are being applied, but there are like a whole lot of other nutrient which the soil is not getting. There is no organic matter, there are no living organisms, no bacteria, fungi in that soil. It is sort of infertile kind of thing, and a medium it has become. It's sort of become a dead medium. You're putting chemical fertilizers into this and you're trying to grow fruits and vegetables. So if the soil itself does not have those organic nutrients, where will the roots get that nutrient from? So how will our food is going to be nutritious? So the carbon sequestration in agriculture is about, a lot of manure, a lot of organic matter getting, put in the agricultural soils, and also no tillage agriculture. So once you let the soil stay undisturbed, you do not till it, a lot of life starts coming into that, in terms of a lot of different kind of fungi and insects, and different agriculture friendly organisms there. So the organic content of that soil increases. Of course that organic content will get into the food, and the food is going to be more nutrient rich. There is, you have to reduce methane and nitrous oxide emissions in agriculture. So from the chemical fertilizers that we are applying, there is nitrous oxide emissions happening on account of that. And also the manures that we are using, how are we using them? It can be done in a better manner, so that there is less release of methane, and more of that organic matter, manure, gets stayed captured in the soils. Forests, we have to conserve our forests. The forests are a huge stock of carbon. All that organic matter there in the soil, all that vegetation, there are big trees, there are small trees, there are shrubs, there are lichens, there's grass, there's like under the soil there are, thousands of insects and fungi and bacteria. It's like huge. We cannot even imagine, what we are seeing above the ground. Much more carbon is getting stored below the ground. But if we do not let that, survive, we do not let that forest survive, we cut it, we deforest it, then all of that captured carbon is going to get released in the atmosphere. Yeah. So I would like to talk about the planetary boundaries a bit. And what are planetary boundaries? So there are various systems in the earth, and within those planetary boundaries, the human life, the living beings can have been existing for thousands and millions of years in equilibrium. Now, this planetary boundaries concept was researched by Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research in Germany a few decades back. Yeah. So, they did that study in terms of how those planetary boundaries are being crossed, as in whatever the limit that we had, that within this limit, the human life, the life of other organisms is going to be sustainable in equilibrium. Those boundaries are getting breached. What are the different boundaries? They are of course, climate change, which is global warming related. It has been exceeded already, and novel entities, the different kind of chemicals that we are putting into the our ecosystem in nature, out there in soil and water and air, and lakhs and lakhs of chemicals have been created by humans which were not there. 1.4 lakh synthetic chemicals have been created by humans, and toxicity effect has been tested on only a few thousands, and they are just getting discharged into our soils, in our water, and this is making, the system, the entire system that we have, it is making it unfit for living beings existence. And then there are, of course, the ozone, which is not yet been breached. Ozone depletion, the aerosol loading, ocean acidification is not yet, but we are steadily heading towards that. Then there are the various biogeochemical flows, the way they have got disrupted. Freshwater change, the way it has happened, it has already become sort of unsustainable. The disruptions have become unsustainable. And you have the land system, how the entire land system has changed. That has become unsustainable. The biosphere integrity, the poor animals and plants and trees, they are like human beings' mercies. So they do not have their own autonomy. They are like, can be easily, and they are being easily trampled upon by humans. And we have the biosphere integrity has been reached. So 9 out of 15 boundaries, planetary boundaries required for sustainable human existence have already been breached. So yeah, we have to prioritize well-being for all. It cannot be like, one country can do well for itself and then it'll escape effects of all the other geographic areas. So it is all interconnected. Some emissions happening in another country is affecting emissions, a poor little country, an island country, for no fault of theirs. So everything, and even like, France has had summers where their rivers were dry and they had to shut down their plants, nuclear plants also, because there was no water. So how it is an interrelated system. We are in this one big ship together, and every individual, every entity, every country has to act. Otherwise, it is like either survival of all or none. So kind of. Yeah, let's go ahead. Yeah. So, basically, we have to start with, in terms of the resources that we use in our own lives, in our businesses, wherever. So it is like we have to basically start with a refuse approach. First, we have to evaluate, do we really need this thing? We have to refuse in terms of trying to consume more. The consumption really has to come down. Do we really need to consume this particular thing or use certain resource? Is it really needed? And then, of course, the recycle part of it, you have to reimagine, you have to redesign things, and you can use the same thing after it's used for another use, all of that. So, and also reduce. You have to reduce and you have to optimize, and we have to not waste resources. And there's this entire repair culture that has to come back. So our grandparents and our parents were living in this manner, you can say. They were like, there was no dependence on plastic. There was like minimal, they did not shop a lot. They did not overeat a lot, and they did not consume a lot. They were not mindless, use of electronic media. So life happened. Life existed, in a different manner, in a much more sustainable manner. So it is like time to go back, time to reevaluate and change things at every institutional and individual level. So we have to change our way of thinking. It's all about that mindset shift. And of course, once the thoughts change, the actions are also going to change.
There's a question, Amit. Given that the renewable sources provide only a small percentage of our energy and that nuclear power is so expensive, what can we realistically do to get off fossil fuels as soon as possible? Is there an average climate mitigation matrix to look into? Is there any average?
It is all very country specific. Like in Europe, as European Union, they have, I think, they have this target of having 50% renewable energy consumption by 2050, if I'm right. But as India, I think our consumption currently is very low. I think, if I'm right, it's just about 10% or something. Though in terms of installed capacity, it seems more, but the way solar and wind works, the actual generation is lesser and the utilization is lesser still. So we have installation related target for 2030, 500 gigawatts or something that we're targeting. First of all, it should be consumption related target. So it is easier to give that bigger 500 gigawatt number and, just compare it with your entire installation and say that it'll believe 50% sort of is going to be renewable energy installations in terms of capacity, but it has to be actually generation and consumption related target, and that is the right thing to do. And so it will have to be like, really clear thought and priority on part of the government at the central level, and then it goes down to the state level in terms of, sort of mandating and facilitating residential houses and businesses and commercial complexes to use as much of renewable energy as possible. There are smaller biogas based systems also which can, and agri waste based systems, compressed biogas and, compressed natural gas, as in the bio based, agri waste based smaller systems, modular systems are there, and agri waste based power plants, smaller modular power plants are also there. So it should be mandated that at least the businesses and the industry, as much as renewable energy sources available to them, whether utilizing their own waste or whether utilizing the waste available in their nearby areas, in terms of whether it is like, mandi, which is generating a lot of food waste, or whether there is a lot of agri waste available in the area where they are located. So they should be, mandated to utilize those renewable energy first. Of course, there is this entire, these solar plants and wind energy plants that the factories can access through open access, as in they do not have the space for it. The plant can be elsewhere and they can use the grid, pay certain charges to the grid and use wind and energy. So all those policies are there. They have become increasingly, friendlier to the business, and a lot of businesses are going for it. So, and right now it is sort of, you can say it is not mandatory, but increasingly it should. I mean, government discoms have that target to sort of, renewable energy purchase obligations they have, but it's not there for the businesses. It is, and a lot of targets that the renewable energy targets that the businesses have are not, it's like voluntary right now. So until and unless they are pushed for it, they will not go beyond sort of what everyone is doing and, what they have to do. So it'll be very few businesses who will, there are businesses, a lot of, foreign businesses are going for 100% renewable energy targets. There are progressive companies in India who are taking 100% renewable energy procurement targets. But it has to be, of course, the policy should make it more cheaper for the businesses to buy that power. And also there has to be target for the smaller businesses, also medium businesses also, to do that. So wherever it makes sense, companies are installing it. It has to be, there has to be target which has to be given. Proactive companies will do it on their own, but somebody, most of the entities, most of the individuals are not proactive, so the targets are required for that.
Next question from NK: how to calculate GHG emissions?
Yeah, so GHG emissions, a lot of, so every emission, every source of emission has a emission factor, and there are emission factors in India. Country specific emission factors will be there for certain things. So, and GHG Protocol Institute, they have the courses. You can go and, look at their recorded webinars and understand that entire process. So it's not difficult. It is essentially a very simple thing that you figure out, you inventory that what are your sources of GHG emissions, you figure out the emission factor for that, and that quantity you just multiply, you get the carbon emissions. So it is very simple, essential thing, and there are certain protocols around it and the way to do it and what are the right way to inventorize, and a lot of guidelines are around that. But essentially it is a very simple thing, and a lot of free online resources are there. The GHG Protocol Institute itself, which came up with this protocol, they have free recorded webinars, so you can go and go through that. And of course, thankfully, so a lot of the graphics that you saw, I did not make them, it was all there on the internet. So a lot of material is there on the internet, a lot of free resources there. So whoever, if you seek, those who seek shall find kind of thing is there. So it is, yeah, a pretty simple thing to do essentially.